Welcome to the first proper devlog of Warlock's Gantlet. Last time I gave an introduction to the project as a whole, and this time I will focus on what I am currently doing. Thus, today, we will be talking about Kaleidomancer, my latest game dev tool. I make all of the graphics for Warlock's Gantlet in an art tool that I wrote several years ago, and it looks like this. This is a screenshot of it. It is the second art tool I've ever written, and it has served me well for the past few years. But Warlock's Gantlet requires graphics in far greater quantity and of higher quality than any of my previous games. Therefore, I decided to write a new tool with more functionality than the previous ones. And it looks like this, currently. Some of you might wonder why I don't just expand on the previous tool, and the answer is that the code is not very well structured, so it would be quite difficult to do. Other people might wonder why I don't just use an existing art tool like Sprite or Krita. The answer to that is because I really enjoy doing things on my own and in my own way. The only aspect of development in which I use third-party software, above the IDE level of course, is audio, and that is because I looked into it and have, for the time being, decided that it would be too time-consuming. With that out of the way, let's have a look at Kaleidomancer. As you see it now, it is very much a work in progress. It already has most of the functionality of the previous tool, plus some of the functions that were either not present in the predecessor at all, or great improvements over the ones in that one. The roughly sketched imagery you see along the edges here, as well as in the background, will eventually be a partially interactive UI. Now I'll just show you which functionalities that have been implemented, and then tell you which ones are upcoming. First of all, we have this File menu over here, where you can create a new project, load one that's already existing, save one you're working on, or export it to either one of two different file formats. When it comes to drawing, you can of course do regular freehand drawing. You can adjust the various color values to get a different color from the RGB spectrum. You can zoom both to smaller than 1:1 or greater, up to I think 20 so far. That's just an arbitrary limit though. This is already better than the previous program, which could only zoom to 2 different levels. I can pan around the picture at as much as I want, and that was not possible at all in the previous program. When I have a color selected, I can do a flood fill. And then I can pick up a color from the canvas, like so, and use that. I can lock my cursor, or rather my brush, you might say, to the pixel grid, both in freehand, and that means that I can move the cursor as much as I want, but the brush will draw in a grid that is aligned with the brush size. So this brush is 5 by 5 pixels, and thus it'll always fill in a square that is aligned with a grid starting at the upper left corner of the picture. I can also make sure that the cursor or brush locks to the canvas, and now I can only move it with the keyboard keys, which is really good for high precision drawing. Now, it might not be so difficult at this level, but when you have just one drawing pixel by pixel, really, not 5 by 5, then it's very useful indeed. Then I can go back to normal drawing. Then I can press a button to make sure that the entire painting is aligned, or all of the colors align with that pixel grid. It looks like this. And that means that no colors are allowed to overlap any of the pixels. In this case, a 5 by 5 pixel size grid, based on the brush size always. Furthermore, I can mirror or flip the picture, like so. Only horizontally so far, but it's something. I can also rotate it clockwise 90 degrees, which is rather fun. And finally, I can copy and paste just about as much as I want. Those are the functions that have been implemented so far. The upcoming functions, not necessarily in the order that I will implement them, are a limited modifiable palette, which means that you'll be able to decide 8, 16, 32, 64, maybe even 128 or 256 colors that you'll be able to select by just clicking them. I plan to have them here located here in the bottom somewhere, possibly aligned with this. This is supposed to be a turtle shell, but that might be a bit too tricky. So maybe something else colorful. I don't know, fish maybe? You'll also be able to take a pre-existing picture like this and align it or map it to that palette or a selected palette, which means that every pixel in the picture should be changed to the nearest color in value, adhering to these 3 red, green, and blue values of that exists in the predetermined palette or limited palette. I want to be able to draw rectangles, lines, and circles, possibly also ellipses, and that's not possible yet. I want to be able to have multiple layers per picture, as is so common in modern art software. I want to be able to have multiple copy buffers. So when I take a copy like this, I call this a snippet. I want to be able to store it, maybe 5 or 10 of these, so that when I take a new one, I don't have to discard this one immediately. I can go back and I can have several snippets stored and select between them. I think that would be very useful. I want the ability to rotate and flip a snippet that I'm holding or attached to the cursor like this. And then I actually also want to be able to rotate it to any number of degrees that I want. So I could rotate it only a little instead of always 90 degrees or so. Then I would like to have multiple projects open at once or at any one time. So I could have this project and another one to its side and display at least one of them in a transparent way, so I could do tracing. This would be very useful for creating animations, I think. And an optional function would be a running animation, so I could have, if I'm working on a frame in an animation, I can see the animation happening here, including the frame I'm working on. But I think that might be a bit too much work to implement. So we'll see. So with the possible exception of that, these are all the core functionalities that I want to implement in this tool before I consider it good enough to continue development on Warlock's Gantlet. I might add or subtract 1 or 2 to that list, but I think that is unlikely. At the moment, I'm focusing on creating the interactive UI, what you see around here, to make the tool a bit easier to work with. Currently, many of the functions are only available via direct keyboard commands, and there is very little indication on screen as to which mode you are currently in. That said, I sort of flip back and forth between working on the UI and implementing new functions as I feel that I need them. I would like to end this video with a few more general notes about this program and Warlock's Gantlet. I'm considering releasing this art tool, Kaleidomancer, on itch.io for free, for those who might want to play with it sometime in the future. I am not aiming to make a program that can compete with any of the major pixel art tools out there, but I think this might be a good enough tool for some simple pixel art editing, and maybe some of you would enjoy working with it because of its unique looks or something like that. This might not happen for quite some time still, as releasing it to the public would require a fair bit of polishing beyond the basic stuff I've mentioned here. With regards to Warlock's Gantlet, I am quite certain that I would like to use a limited color palette for the graphics, which is not the case in the current version. Thus, one of my first tasks upon returning to development of Warlock's Gantlet will likely be to start converting the graphics to a limited palette. I am not sure exactly how many colors I will go with, but it will probably be at least 64 and at most 256. The reason for this is that I really like the look of a lot of early 90s games, such as these, which had such limited palettes. I want Warlock's Gantlet to be reminiscent of these, and especially one particular quality of them. They all have this rather colorful look to them. Even Doom, like which you see here, looks quite cheery compared to many modern FPSs. I am of course not saying that modern games never have a cheery look to them, or that Doom never looked dark or scary, but the limited palette seems to have made these games more colorful than many of their modern counterparts, even when that was not the primary purpose. Thus, I think that a limited and carefully curated palette will help me greatly in achieving a similar feel. To me, this somewhat unnatural colorfulness really emphasizes that you are visiting a fantasy world, and I love it. Now, that is all I have to say for this time, so I hope you enjoyed this devlog. More are coming quite soon, and with that, I wish you all a very good day, and goodbye.